Is it your first time DMing? Don't worry about it. Whether you're just doing a one shot to give your forever DM a break, or you're throwing yourself into the wonderful world that is being a dungeon master, I've got 5 tips here that are going to make it so much easier for you and make sure everyone at the table has a lot of fun. So the first tip up is going to be take notes. Whether you're doing a one shot or running a full campaign, notes are going to be your best friend because it makes it so much easier for you to be able to keep track of what everyone's doing without having to memorize it. Because I guarantee you, your players are going to do something crazy that you couldn't think of that you're going to want them to have to deal with later on down the road. It makes it so much easier to remember things about each individual character, like personalities or whatnot, so you don't have to try and force yourself to remember it down the road. The second tip we're going to talk about is pay attention to your players' backstories. Now, the reason for this is because it makes it so that you can throw in NPCs from their backstory, from their childhood, from whatever they did before this campaign. This is especially good rule if you're running a full-on campaign and not just a one-shot, because then you can throw in a quest line that has them touching up on past traumas, and that will always make your players feel more included in the overall campaign, the overall storyline, as well as breaking up the monotony of the main storyline. So whether you're doing a module or you've homebrewed your campaign, throwing in a side quest line that touches on each individual player's backstory will really help break up the monotony, as well as make them feel more immersed into the story. Now, tip number 3 is going to be super important. It's almost as important as the first tip of taking notes, and that is going to be ready to improvise. See, no matter how in-depth your planning is for any given campaign, once again, whether it's a module or a homebrewed campaign, you can't plan for everything. And trying to do that is just going to drive yourself insane. So you just need to be ready to improvise, because your players are going to throw something at you that you have no way of planning for. And the best thing you could ever do is roll with the punches, and that's not ever really going to be easy per se, but it doesn't have to be as difficult as it sounds, as long as you mentally prepare yourself to improvise for whatever crazy hijinks they decide to torture you with. Because at the end of the day, you're in charge of the story. You get to keep it running however you want it to run, but make sure that you have to keep it fun and immersive for your players as well. So improvisation is a key skill you have to have as a dungeon master, and I'm sure you all have it. You just have to be ready to do it. Tip number 4 is going to be descriptive. By that I mean, when you walk into a tavern, describe in fairly decent detail what your players are seeing, what they're hearing, what they're smelling. Now, it's also a good idea to keep in mind that you don't want to tell them how they're feeling personally. Now, you can say, oh, you feel a cold draft running through the building, but don't say, oh, as you feel this cold draft, you also feel a tinge of fear. Let the players feel whatever they're going to feel on their own. Don't try and tell them how they feel, because it's going to break immersion. Some people wouldn't feel scared in a completely pitch black cave, so it's not fair for you to tell them that they're feeling scared. With the exception of, obviously, if a monster is using the fear spell or the charm spell, some form of magic that dictates how somebody feels. If none of that's going on, don't tell them how they feel. Just describe everything else. And make sure you're telling them about smells and lighting arrangements and breezes, temperatures in the room and the area, because that really helps build the setting and it draws them into that particular setting, which makes it a lot more immersive and it makes it a lot easier for them to RP. And role-playing is half the fun of this game. So you want to make sure you're as descriptive as possible while not going too overboard, and definitely without telling them how they feel internally. Now, this last tip goes kind of hand in hand with be descriptive, and it's ambiance. By that I mean, if you're playing in person, if you are lucky enough to have a group of people that live close enough to you and are readily available to meet in person regularly, set the ambiance. Play in a room that has like a dimmer switch for the light. Make sure you've got like music. Maybe set up a couple fans for if you're having them run through windy areas. Ambiance is key in immersion, and it helps so much keep players invested. Now, if you're like me and you haven't been able to play in person for a while, that's okay. It can be as simple as having music loaded up to play online when you're on, say, Roll20. I always have music set up so if they walk into a tavern, I can press play and there's tavern music playing. Sometimes I'll find the tavern music that has background chatter, so it sounds like they can actually hear people talking without actually hearing conversations with tavern music. I've got some nice music for when they're out in the forest or if they go into the Feywilds. Music can really help bring everything together, not as well as like dimming the lights when they walk into a cave, but it helps with the immersion, and it's definitely an easy thing to do that will really help bring in the fun and bring in encouraging role-playing in the game. All right, so those are my top 5 tips for new dungeon masters. Obviously, there's way more tips out there, but those are, in my opinion, the most important 5 to really help any new dungeon masters not only get the hang of it, but also help make sure everyone at the table's having fun and make sure that there is a certain level of immersion for all the players. If you have anything to add, you don't have any questions, you want me to do another video like this, because I've got plenty more tips, just please feel free to say so in the comments. I respond to every comment that I get. I'm always happy to hear from y'all.